Welcome. I'm Deborah Steidel-Wall, Deputy Archivist of the United States, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's conversation with three major historical figures of the women's suffrage movement. Our partners for this program are the American Historical Theater and the National Archives Foundation, and we thank them both for their support. Since the start of August, the National Archives has joined with numerous other organizations across the nation to observe the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. This amendment, which secured women's right to vote in the United States Constitution, was ratified by the required number of states on August 18, 1920, and was certified on August 26th. Today, August 26th is recognized as Women's Equality Day, and so it is fitting that we observe this centennial with a meeting of minds among Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and Alice Paul. We'll continue our commemoration of the 19th Amendment through the end of the month. Our webpage, archives.gov/women, contains many resources for learning more about women's rights and women's history, and you'll also find links to events and activities related to the centennial. The National Archives Showcase exhibit for the 19th Amendment Centennial is Rightfully Hers, American Women and the Vote. Although you can't visit the exhibit in person at the National Archives building in Washington, D.C., you can view its online version at museum.archives.gov. Rightfully Hers tells the story of women's struggle for voting rights as a critical step toward equal citizenship. The exhibit explores how American women across the spectrum of race, ethnicity, and class advanced the cause of suffrage, and it follows the struggle for voting rights beyond 1920. Now I'll turn you over to our moderator for today's discussion, Dorothy Dougherty, Programs Director at the National Archives at New York City. Dorothy will guide the conversation among Sojourner Truth, portrayed by Daisy Century, Susan B. Anthony, portrayed by Marjorie Goldman, and Alice Paul, portrayed by Taylor Williams. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for that introduction, Deborah Wall, Deputy Archivist of the United States, and welcome to today's program on the 19th Amendment and Women's Equality Day. My name is Dorothy Dougherty, and for the next hour, I will be moderating our discussion with three key figures in the fight for women's right to vote. Just so you know, this program is being broadcast live, so if you have any questions for our speakers, please enter that into our YouTube chat feature. And if you don't have a question but would like to tell us where you're watching, we would love to know. We also are interested to see how you are celebrating the centennial event. As you can see, I am celebrating by wearing my suffrage sash. I also have a centennial pin that I ordered from the National Archives gift shop. Another way we can celebrate is by sharing our stories online. We have a number of animated GIFs and Instagram stickers, so you can post that on your social media posts using the hashtag 19suffragestories. All of these details, as Ms. Wall said, are on our website at archives.gov/women. So let's begin our discussion today. And my first guest, I am happy to introduce, is Ms. Susan B. Anthony. Hello, Ms. Anthony, how are you today?
I'm feeling very energetic today. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. So my first question is, how did you get involved in the women's suffrage movement?
Well, I didn't start my life as an agitator in the women's suffrage movement. It kind of grew gradually over time. It began when I first was made to understand that married women had no legal rights in this country, that they could not own property or keep their earnings. And I was taught to believe that men and women are equal in the sight of God and should have equal rights. In my Quaker household, we certainly were treated equally. This was a very cruel comeuppance to me when I was taught about that. And as it was going to be a long, slow process to change those laws, I became interested in the temperance movement. We thought perhaps if we could take the alcohol out of the hands of abusive husbands, things would not be quite so bad for the wives who would complain to their husbands when they drank away their wage packets that they had no money to feed the children. An abused mother could not even take her children with her when she left the marriage. It was in the temperance movement that I met Mrs. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And through her, I had my introduction to the abolitionist movement. Of course, the stain of slavery was still existing in our shores at that time, and we devoted all of our efforts to trying to remove that. It wasn't until after the Civil War, when the 13th Amendment had finally been passed and involuntary servitude could no longer exist on our shores, that we realized it was time to turn our attention to the rights for the women.
So is that why you believe women should have the right to vote?
Oh, I believe that women already possess the right to vote. You can understand that by looking at the founding documents of our republic. The Declaration of Independence rightly asserts that we are all created equal and endowed by our Creator with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Furthermore, it states that whenever any government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, surely the right of the whole people to vote is clearly implied, for no matter how much a government should be destructive to my happiness, a disenfranchised class could neither alter nor abolish it, nor put a new one in its place.
Well, you know,
the government that compels us to obey laws to which we have never given our consent are half of the people, left wholly at the mercy of the other half, in direct violation of the spirit and letter of the declarations of the framers of government. Now, I realize that that document is not a matter of law, but the Constitution is. And in the Constitution, the 14th Amendment stated that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens thereof and of the state in which they reside. So the question I have to ask you is, are women persons? I think they are. And I don't think any of our opponents could have the hardihood to say that they are not. The 15th Amendment went on to say that the right of a citizen to vote shall not be denied or abridged because of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Well, I have a race, it is white. I do not have a previous condition of servitude other than the metaphorical one that is on the yoke of all women in this country. So if I am guaranteed citizenship, I am guaranteed the right to vote. And nowhere do we talk about governments granting rights. We are not asking for the right to vote. I believe we already possess it. What we are demanding is that the right to vote be guaranteed and protected.
well, it's fascinating that you say that. And yes, I definitely agree that women are people. You obviously believed this to the point that in 1872, you voted in a Rochester, New York election. And I know this because the National Archives at New York City actually has a copy of that arrest record as well as your conviction. So can you tell me a little bit about your arrest and the trial that followed?
Well, it was quite a scene, as you might imagine, but I was hoping to gather publicity for the cause. When I went to register to vote, the young men at the barbershop who were in charge of the registration were quite nonplussed when I arrived with some of my neighbors and my sisters. They asked me what made me think I had the right to vote, and I read them the Constitution. And they thought, well, I seem to have a point there, and they couldn't go against the Constitution, so they allowed me to register, not supposing I would dare to go vote, but they did not know who they were dealing with. For on election morning, I gathered my sisters around me before it could become too crowded and create an unnecessary spectacle. And we had to answer the same questions there. Why do I think I have the right to vote? And I read them the Constitution again, and we were permitted to cast our ballots. I wrote to Mrs. Stanton, well, we have been and gone and done it, positively voted at 7 o'clock this morning. And then 2 weeks later, a knock comes at the door of my home in Rochester. And there is a young man there who says he wants to take me into downtown Rochester to see Commissioner Storrs. I said, well, I have no social acquaintance with Commissioner Storrs, so I politely declined the invitation. And he said, no, Miss Anthony, you see, I have to arrest you. And I said, this is the way you treat everyone you arrest. And he said, well, no, I usually have to put them in handcuffs. And I said, well, put on the handcuffs. take me down. I want everyone to see how the government treats a citizen who is only exercising her right to vote. Well, he declined the handcuffs, but he took me down on the streetcar. And when we got there, he paid my fare. And I said, are you paying your fare because I'm a woman or because this is part of your obligation in your work? And he said, oh no, he has to pay all of the fares for anyone that he brings in for arrest. And I said, well, that's the first 5 cents worth I ever got out of Uncle Sam. And when we went to trial, the judge, Lord Hunt, was kind enough and efficient enough to write his opinion before he even came to Rochester. I was not permitted to speak in my own defense because the judge said, oh, women are not competent to testify in a court of law. And when all of the evidence had been laid before them, he turned to the jury and said, gentlemen of the jury, I thank you very much for your service. I now direct you to return a verdict of guilty. Did you ever hear of such a thing? When he asked me if the defendant had anything to say, you can imagine that I leapt from my seat and I said, yes, Your Honor, I have a great many things to say, for with your directed verdict of guilty, every principle of government is trampled underfoot. My civil rights, my natural rights, my political rights, my judicial rights are all alike ignored. And then he fined me $100. And I said, Your Honor, I will never pay $1 of your unjust fine, and I never have.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for voting in that election and for being the name associated with the movement. And thank you for mentioning the other women that were arrested along with you. I think it's important to note that as the leader, your name was out there, but there were many women behind the movement as well.
Oh,
and I think at this point, Miss Anthony, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to come back in a little bit, and I'm going to turn the conversation to our next guest, Miss Sojourner Truth. And so, Miss Sojourner Truth, how are you today?
I am good, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for coming here today. Let's start with the first question I have, and it's about your name. Your name is so unique. Could you tell us a little bit about the story behind it?
Okay, I was born on a Dutch plantation in upstate New York, Ulster County, not too far from the Hudson River, or somewhere around 1797. They give me the name of Isabel Bumphrey. They call me Belle for short. And Bumphrey in Dutch means tall and strong. So I grew up tall and strong like my daddy. My daddy's name was James, my mama's name was Betsy. It seems like whenever I went, people would talk. And I heard their names, and I thought about my name. So after New York State passed that law in 1827 saying that I could be free, I moved into New York City, started to work there. I stayed at a commune on the outskirts of town, but I didn't like the goings on there. So I said, God, tell me, what should I do? God said, Belle, be about your father's business. So I immediately started packing everything I could in a knapsack, and I left New York City. That morning, I left New York City with $2 in my pocket and a song in my heart. And I hummed and I moved along, and I thought about it. I says, now that I'm a free woman, I need a free woman's name. What shall I call myself? So I thought about it. God told me to move up and down the countryside to preach about sin, the ills of sin, and the meanness and the wickedness of slavery. And God told me to speak up for women's rights. So God told me to do like the people in the Bible. The people in the Bible sojourn the valleys and the hills, the mountainside, to spread the word of the gospel. I thought about that. If the people in the Bible are sojourning the countryside, I'm about to do the same thing. I'm about to sojourn the countryside to preach and to speak for women's rights. Sojourn the countryside. I am a sojourner. I'll call myself Sojourner. I'd like that. Then I kept on humming and I kept on moving. I said, most people got two names. What shall my last name be? I said, wherever I go, I'll speak from the heart. And I'll always speak the truth. That's it. Truth shall be my last name. So from this day forward, my name shall be Sojourner Truth. And that's what I did. I sojourned the countryside. I spoke to every town, every city. I would start to sing. People would begin to gather around. I would tell them of my days of being a slave, of being sold 3 times, and the beatings and just the evilness of slavery. And I would say, women, you've got just as much right as the men folk. A man should not have dominion over the woman. A woman should be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with a man. You should be able to work outside the house. You should be able to speak in public without being ridiculed. You should be able to vote, run for public office. Oh, the word got around. Sojourner Truth is coming to town. Sojourner Truth is talking about women's rights. Oh, the crowd got bigger and bigger. It got so I had to get a secretary to keep track of all my speaking engagement because everybody wanted Sojourner Truth to come to their town. And sometimes the crowd got rowdy, I tell you. They had rocks getting ready to throw at me, but I would start to sing. And they would drop the rocks. And sometimes they would have to lock me up for my own good, to keep me safe from the crowd. But late at night when the crowd went home, they let me out. I would walk to the next city and start my speaking engagement again. And sometimes they would say, oh, lady, if you speak here tonight, we're going to burn the place down. I said, burn it down. I'll speak upon the ashes. And that's what I did for years and years. Sojourning the countryside, speaking up for women's rights.
Wow, that's such a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I know in 1851, you actually delivered a public speech called Ain't I a Woman? Could you tell us what the lessons are from that speech? What we should take away from it?
Oh, I'd be happy to. Now, my grandson, Sammy, was traveling with me at the time. And I said, Sammy, read the newspaper. Tell me what's going on in the world. He says, well, Grammy, the women in Akron, Ohio is having a women's rights convention. I say, say no more, Sammy. Akron, Ohio it is. I'm going to go on up there and see what my white sisters be after. 2-day convention. Went on up there. I sit in the back, listen to everything going on. I wasn't invited. I just showed up. Most of the men doing all the talking. Oh, they said some things that didn't sit too well with me, I tell you. They said women don't need to be equal to a man. A man is smarter than a woman. A woman is weak and need to be taken care of. And Eve, by her lonesome, managed to turn the world upside down. Order went on and on. I said, now how come the women ain't speaking up? But remember, women dare not speak in public. Woman dare not debate a man in public. So I said, I gotta say something. So the next day I went back, I sat a little bit closer to the front. The men doing all the talking again. I told the ladies, I said, psst, psst, excuse me. Can I get up there and say a few words? And they looked back and they saw me, they said, oh, that's not Sojourner Truth. Oh no, don't let her speak. She'll ruin us. They'll pick it, they'll burn the place down. No, everywhere she goes, she causes trouble. Do not let her speak. I said, I won't take long, but I just got to say a few words to respond to these menfolk. They said, well, one lady said, well, in time, you'll let her speak. And the other says, no, do not let her speak. But I didn't come prepared with no speech in my head. I didn't come prepared to go up in the front of the convention and say nothing. But I had to respond to these men with all they had to say. Now, I didn't know whether they're going to let me speak or not, but I wasn't going to chance it for them to run out of time and let me have no time to speak. So I thought about it. How am I going to get up there? So I started to sing. It was early in the morning. Before I could get another word out, the place was pin quiet. Everybody turned around and looked at me. They were pointing, mouths open. Some of the ladies just fainted on the chair. Oh, they said, oh, that's Sojourner Truth. Who let her in here? Oh, and I heard all the ruckus. So I said, here's my chance. I got up and straightened my shawl, and I walked up to the front. All the way up there, they were pointing and they were talking. And I took my time and I got up to the front. By the time I got up to the front, the place was pin quiet. I started to speak. Didn't have no speech prepared. Just responded to the men. Said, that gentleman over there said that Eve by her lonesome managed to turn the world upside down. Shouldn't all the women in here and women everywhere be able to turn the world right side up again? Oh, the women got up and started to clap, but the men folk looked at them so mean, they sat back down. And lesson number 1, all the women should be able to work together. Lesson number 2, they said, a woman is not equal to a man. I say to you, sir, if you've got a whole gallon and I've got just a little old pint, isn't it just plain old mean to deny me my little portion full? The lesson learned is, if you're rich or poor, doesn't matter. Everyone is deserving of equal rights. Everyone should be equal under the law, rich or poor, colored or white, doesn't matter. And another gentleman over there said that a woman is weak. Sir, I say to you, there's no such thing as a weak woman. They said a woman is weak and she needs to be taken care of and given the best of places. No one ever helped me over mud puddles and into carriages and gave me the best of places. And ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Lesson, rich or poor, you're still a woman. Colored or white, you're still a woman. Married or not, you're still a woman. Whether you have children or not, you're still a woman. No matter what the circumstance, you're still a woman. So after the convention, they all come up to me and shook my hand and everybody was excited about my speech. But I said, I didn't quite have no speech prepared. I was just speaking to the men folk. But everywhere I went, people said, Sojourner, say that ain't I a woman speech again. So everybody just wanted to hear that speech over and again, but it just happened on the top of my head.
Those are wonderful lessons. So what advice or what suggestions would you make for people or women activists today?
Oh, to keep things stirring, to keep things moving. Never let the movement go still. And no movement or no idea is too small. One time I was to speak at a camp meeting that said, old lady, we don't care too much for your talk. That mean about as much as the bite of a flea. I said, small it may seem to you, but I bet I'll keep you scratching. So no project or no idea is too small, and keep things moving and stirring. Another thing I would say to the women folk, to learn the law, get that book learning, learn all about the law, find out what law is written down and write some law of your own, write some new laws. And I want the women folk to work together, just like the fingers on a hand. Now they're pretty strong on the hand, but if you put them together, they're even more strong and they'll deliver quite a blow. So I want my sisters, colored and white, rich and poor, all to work together to deliver a blow. That's what I want them to do.
That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Truth.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you in a little bit. And we're going to move on to our third guest. And in between, I'm just going to remind the folks watching, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat feature. And thank you for the shout outs. I'm just going to read a list here. We have a few people joining us from around the country. The first person is from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Hello. We have a few folks from Maryland, including Gambrills, Maryland. We have some folks watching from Smithville, Ohio, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Kennesaw, Georgia, Panama City, Florida. Wow, this is a great mix. We have some folks from Kansas City, Missouri, some more folks from Georgia and Atlanta, Houston, Texas, and New York. So let us know where you are and where you're watching from, and if you have any questions. And at this point, I'm going to introduce our third guest, Miss Alice Paul. So as Miss Alice Paul joins us, how are you today, Miss Paul?
Well, I'm happy to see you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. I have a question. Could you tell us a little bit about your early life?
Early life, yes. Well, I was born in 1885, but don't think for a minute that I was a Victorian. You see, Queen Victoria believed that she was powerful and independent because of the divine right of monarchs. Well, she admired many philosophers of the time who believed that women were plainly inferior to men. Well, that was an attitude I never understood. You see, I came from a Quaker family. We're Hicksite Quakers. We believe in the inner light, the divine in each person. And I was taught equality from the very beginning. My home is Moorestown, New Jersey. Paulsdale is my home, a comfortable house. I was born there and I grew up there. And I loved my father deeply. He was a farmer, but also president of a bank, but mostly a gentleman farmer. And he used to say, whenever anything disagreeable had to be done, well, I bank on Alice. He died while I was in college, and I would hope that he would be proud of my accomplishments. I graduated from Swarthmore College in 1905. I went on to do a graduate degree, a master's degree in social work, which I received from Columbia University. And then I studied at the University of Pennsylvania and received a PhD in economics there. After we won the vote, I decided to go back and study law because I thought if you don't know the law, someone can talk you down. So I got so engrossed in the subject, I ended up with 3 law degrees.
And can you tell us then, how did you get involved in the fight for women's suffrage?
Well, it was there from the very beginning. As I say, it came from my Quaker values, my Quaker roots, my Quaker principles. My mother was active in the National American Women's Suffrage Association, and I helped her even as a girl. So I always knew about the principles of equality from my Quaker upbringing. But then when I went out into the broader world and left my Quaker community, it was as if I had been punched in the stomach. But the treatment of women for votes in Britain. I bicycled to hear Christabel Pankhurst speak about votes for women. Well, she tried to speak, but she was heckled off the platform. Still, I paid 1 shilling and signed up, and there I was, a member of the Women's Social and Political Union. And I began to work with the Pankhurst family, Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters, Sylvia and Christabel. They were heading the militant wing. Well, some of their tactics were very unusual for women to engage in. We had parades there, yes, but we also tried to confront politicians with their positions on votes for women. And this would rattle the politicians significantly. So we kept at it. But here was our problem. You see, at that time, no women were allowed at political gatherings. You wonder why? Because the women might confront the politician about his view on votes for women. That frightened them, you see. Well, we had to think of some very clever ways to enter the halls. If we gathered outside, we would be immediately arrested for obstruction of the sidewalk. So we would go in early in the morning. We would pretend to be kitchen staff, perhaps, or char women, cleaning women, and we would wait all day sometimes, and we would hide so that we would not be discovered. And we would pop out when the politician entered the hall and confront him on votes for women. Of course, we were immediately arrested. Oh, the police would whack us with their truncheons. We rolled bats of cotton underneath our clothing to protect ourselves from their blows. Well, in England, I was put in prison 7 times. And when we were imprisoned, the Pankhurst would give orders to hunger strike. We'd stop eating. And then we were force fed. That was a terrible, terrible thing.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. How did women finally get the right to vote?
Well, my major strategy was to confront the political system. I encouraged women to take the vote and not ask politely for it. You see, Carrie Chapman Catt did not believe that we needed a federal amendment. She preferred to go state by state by state and beg women for the vote, beg men for the vote for women. Well, no, we cannot go begging state by state. We must have a federal amendment as envisioned by Susan B. Anthony. Now, I've shown you a picture of a procession that we planned. It was planned for the very eve of Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. We were going to confront him, you see, with the glory of our cause. And here in the photograph, you see Inez Milholland Bosevian. She's on a white horse and she led the suffrage parade. She was a beautiful young woman. And unfortunately, she exhausted herself in her work for suffrage and died at the podium, exclaiming, "Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?" But you see how we presented ourselves all in beautiful white clothing, and we marched in step. We wore sashes of purple, gold, and white. And there's another picture, actually, I believe, from the National Archives that shows us all marching in step. Yes, that's it. And you see how we presented our beautiful cause beautifully to the world and to Woodrow Wilson. Well, there were 5,000 people, men and women, in our procession. So many that Woodrow Wilson said, well, where is everybody? When he came in for his inauguration at the train station, no one was there to greet him. Why, he was told, everyone's at Pennsylvania Avenue watching the suffrage parade. And you can see the crowds. It was a well-publicized procession, which is exactly what we wanted. But it turned very ugly. The crowds moved in, they heckled us. They beat us. They spit on us. It was terrible. Many of us were badly injured. And they even, as you can see in this photo, mobbed the ambulance. So we were prevented from even getting the care that we needed. I will tell you that it is very, very difficult to relive some of these photographs because they show how difficult our journey was until we could reach suffrage. Well, President Wilson did not initially support our cause. He wouldn't even meet with us. He said he was way too busy to bother with women or women's issues. So after our parades, our demonstrations, which I know the public sometimes thought were unladylike and very brazen. I know Mrs. Catt, who ran the National Association, Carrie Chapman Catt, believed that our tactics were too wild. But I told her over and over, no, I'm a shy Quaker woman. When Wilson wouldn't listen to us, we decided to picket the White House. We were known as the Silent Sentinels. As you can see, we peacefully picketed. We had signs. Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty? Democracy begins at home, Mr. President. But again, the crowds viewed us as unpatriotic because the war had started, the First World War. And I had said, we're not stopping simply because there's a war in Europe. You will remember what happened the last time there was a war, the Civil War. And the result was the 14th Amendment, which has within its text, male inhabitants of the land 3 times. No, we would not stop. But again, crowds perceived us as unpatriotic. They grabbed our picket signs and our flags. They beat us with them. We were the ones arrested. We were the ones arrested. We were taken to Occoquan Workhouse. It was filthy. The mattresses were filled with vermin. The food was filled with worms. Well, that makes it easier, doesn't it, to go on hunger strike? Again, we stopped eating. And again, we were faced with force feeding those horrible tubes, the blood, the vomit. Well, I was put in a psychiatric ward. They said I was insane for simply asking for the right to vote. But a deputation of doctors came to examine me, and at the end of the examination found I was indeed sane. Public pressure was exerted, and we were released from prison early. The tide began to turn. But you know, Gandhi and later Martin Luther King used the same tactics we used. Some call it civil disobedience, but I see it as calling attention in whatever way is necessary to the importance of a vital, vital cause.
Thank you for sharing that. So after these tactics and after all of this, the tide did turn and we did get the right to vote in 1920. So what did you do after that?
Well, getting the vote, you see, was just the beginning. Now, my father, he was a farmer, you'll recall, said, once you put your hand to the plow, you don't let go until you've come to the end of the row. I knew we were not yet at the end of the row. I know I was laughed at for never taking off my hat, working night and day, never heating my rooms for fear I would be tempted to read a novel. But you see, getting the vote only gave us equality in voting and not in earning a living or seeing that the laws about earning a living are equal. Therefore, I used my legal training to draft language for an amendment to grant full equality to men and women, a federal amendment, so all the states would have to obey. And that amendment has come to be known as the Equal Rights Amendment, and it was put into Congress through a friendly congressman in 1923. And you can see there some of the demonstrations, some of the later demonstrations in my photograph and the text of the Equal Rights Amendment.
And that's something we're still working on today.
It is. Yes, it is. It's a cause I have been in love with. I am in love with this cause, but we've not yet won it. You see, in 1972, the United States Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment and put it out for ratification to the states. But Congress put a time limit on it of 7 years, and 7 years is not enough time to lobby each state for ratification. But now it's 1977. 35 out of the necessary 38 states have ratified. But by March 22nd, 1979, we must have 3 more states. I'm elderly now, and I do not believe I will live to see that happen, but I am hopeful. I am hopeful that others will move the cause of equal rights forward. So I beg you to ask yourself, what can I do? What can I do for equality of rights? Well, you see, I've always said the women's movement is like a mosaic. If each of us will put in one small piece, do one small thing, together we will create a great work of art. Equality.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. That was wonderful. I think at this point, I'm thinking about the three things that I've learned from all of you, and I would sum them up as hope, passion, and perseverance. There's so many things we still need to do for equal rights today. But we have a lot of questions from the public, so I'd like to get to those questions. And so I'd like to bring back Miss Anthony and Miss Truth to the panel discussion and ask you a few questions from our public. I'm also looking at the list. I'd like to give a shout out to a few other folks that joined us. Ms. Paul, you mentioned New Jersey. We have some folks watching from Weehawken, New Jersey, some folks from Albany, New York, from Burbank, California, from Utah, from Virginia, and more folks from Annapolis, Maryland. So thank you all for joining us. And I think the first question I have is for, it's actually for you, Miss Paul. And that question is, what do the colors of the sash mean? What does the purple, gold, and white stand for?
No, we're always asked that question wherever we go, and it's a very simple answer. We believe that we had a glorious cause, and we wanted to present it with beautiful colors. They don't have any significance other than that they became connected with the suffrage movement and now with the movement for equal rights. It's our trademark, if you will. It identifies us as members of the cause.
Great, great. And so then my next question is actually for Miss Truth. So Miss Truth, you have a picture next to you. Could you tell us a little bit about that picture and what year it was taken?
This picture here is of Sojourner Truth, and she has a picture of the Bible and her grandson. It's a picture of her grandson there. I'm not quite sure what year this was taken or whether this was a photograph or a painting from a photograph. But I know it was in Washington, D.C., because this was the Bible that the colored people of Baltimore gave to President Lincoln.
Oh, very nice, thank you. And I have another question for you, Miss Truth. What would you want your legacy to be?
Well, I want people to remember not only the name Sojourner Truth, but to remember that Sojourner Truth showed up and she spoke up. She always had the courage to speak up when it wasn't even fashionable for women to speak up in public. I want them to remember that Sojourner Truth believed for rights and equality for all women. And that Sojourner Truth was way ahead of her time. So I want them to remember the passion, the love, and the dedication I had to the cause, to the women's rights movement. That's what I want them to remember.
Thank you. I have another question, and I think this one would be for Miss Paul. That question is, what did the First Lady Wilson think about women's suffrage and the right to vote for women?
Well, unfortunately, she did not support the right of women to vote or equality for women. And as you may remember, Woodrow Wilson, his wife died, and he married a second time, and his second wife was very much against us. And I fear that she influenced him against the vote. But I will tell you this: President Roosevelt, I mean Theodore Roosevelt, told me that a politician will never do anything against his time. He will never do anything until he sees that it is time to do it. And Woodrow Wilson eventually came out and said he would support rights once he saw the public opinion moving in that direction. Unfortunately, he said, and he did it in New Jersey, my home state, and his, he said it was only state by state by state in state constitutions. But eventually public opinion became so strong, he couldn't deny it. And he even bucked his wife and took the federal amendment seriously and helped us in the end to win it, especially against those Southern Democrats who were dead set against it.
Great, great. So you mentioned husbands and wives. And maybe this question should go back to Miss Anthony. It's, how did the average person deal with votes for women? Did husbands and wives talk about it? And I think that leads me into another question for you. You never married. Is there a reason why you didn't marry?
Well, there are a number of reasons why I didn't marry, although I did have offers of marriage. One was, of course, that the laws eliminated the personhood of a woman who got married. And I did not think that any of the offers came from someone who would respect me and my work. And when I was of marriageable age, I observed that if you married poor, you became a housewife and a drudge. And if you married wealth, you became a pet or a doll. And to think, if I had married when I was in my 20s, I would have spent 40 or more years being a drudge or a doll. And I'm glad I didn't have to do that. Now, as to whether women or men discussed it, well, I certainly hope they did. I could not legislate what goes on in the parlors and the dining rooms of the various houses. And as Miss Paul pointed out, there were many women who were opposed to it, as opposed to women's suffrage, as well as men. We could certainly not have gotten the guarantee, or could not get the guarantee without the efforts of the men, because the power was theirs to give. I know that many men were very sympathetic, but there were very rigid and foolish ideas about what a woman's proper sphere was supposed to be. And it was thought that once a woman gets to do something as radical as participate in her democracy, that all kinds of things would happen, that they would start to wear trousers and they wouldn't take care of the babies, and they would start demanding that they sit around and smoke cigars and drink brandy and all manner of ridiculous things. It was just simply that we wanted an equal voice in the government that we were just as beholden to as the men.
Great, thank you. So one of the other comments I have is that these were very hard times for women. And does anyone have a comment about how they kept hope going? Did you ever lose hope?
I would not lose hope. There was much support to be found within the movement from the ones who were close to me and dear to me. And I feared that I would not live to see the job done, but it was very important to see that we had begun it. And we knew that we would be turning it over to a generation of women who were much better equipped than we were. They had the undisputed right to speak in public. They had business experience. They had higher education. And with all of those things, I knew that failure was impossible.
Anyone else want to add to that? That's wonderful.
Well, for me, it was quite different. Hope was all that I had. Hope was all that I had to just survive on a daily basis. It was the will of God that gave me the vision to go out and speak for women's rights. And I saw that all my life, you see, how men were in charge, the injustice done to women. Everywhere I went, men in charge. So early on, I had this vision in my head to speak up for women's rights. So when I had the chance to speak up, I got results. So I said, it's a good thing for women to speak up. Because if you do speak up, you do get results. So then when God, of course, told me to sojourn the countryside and speak up for women's rights, I knew that was a sign for this to be my life's journey, my life's work. And with hope and daily prayer, that's how I got through it.
Well, I would say this, adding to what Sojourner Truth has just indicated, I had not so much hope as perseverance. You see, I had a divine discontent that the laws were unjust and against God's law, which, again, as a Quaker, I believed was inside of me. And therefore, that inner voice, that inner light, just urged me on beyond hope to perseverance. And I'd like to think that I carried Miss Anthony's work forward and Sojourner Truth's work forward, and that the women of today will carry our work forward.
Great, thank you. I just got another question, and it goes, how did the movement communicate the message across the United States? So were there newspapers that were willing to publish pieces written by everyone, or how did it work as a grassroots movement that went in a national way?
Well, I traveled back and forth across the states and territories as much as I could. The southern states did not particularly welcome me, so I did not spend much time there. But of course, we wrote letters to the newspapers. We wrote broadsides that were distributed. We had pamphlets, and I spoke everywhere I could. I had to do the speaking because Mrs. Stanton was at home with her children, and I would speak and charge a small fee for people to listen to me speak, and we could help fund my travels that way. It was quite exhausting, and I think that's another good reason why I never married.
Well, when I got started with all my sojourns, the word would spread from one city to the next. And when I started my sojourns, I started alone because my white sisters had the same idea, but they didn't welcome me right away. But that didn't stop me. I went from city to city, town to town. And pretty soon, they found out that we had the same idea. So the white suffragists would invite me to their meetings, and I would start speaking. And then we started working together. And then the colored women began to form their organization, and they had pamphlets and ads in the newspaper. So that's how the word got out. But most of the word got out from my sojourn up and down the countryside, speaking out and going to convention. Most of the time I wasn't invited. I just showed up and I spoke out.
And we had similar, in the early days of my work for the vote, we had similar newspapers, broadsides. We met and traveled, which was very difficult, as Miss Anthony has indicated. But of course, later on, we had film, television, radio for the Equal Rights Amendment, surely. So I have had the advantage of the modern conveniences as far as as press and film and television.
Thank you for that input. I would like to say we could probably talk for many, many more hours about the wonderful work each of you has done, but we are out of time. So I need to end this conversation, but I would like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Miss Anthony. Thank you, and thank you, Miss Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to work.
And thank you to the American Historical Theater for their wonderful reenactors who joined us for today's program. And you can explore more stories like these from the records of the National Archives at docsteach.org. I'd also like to invite you to visit the National Archives online store. Right now, they are featuring a number of 19th Amendment Centennial gifts, including my nice pin that I have on my sash. Visit the nationalarchivestore.org. And our commemoration of the 19th Amendment continues this evening. At 6 p.m., we will have a book talk called Vanguard: How Black Women Broke Barriers, Won the Vote, and Insisted on Equality for All. We will be joined by author Dr. Martha Jones and moderator Alelia Bundles. And tomorrow, the Foundation for the National Archives will be hosting a program on the life and legacy of Ida B. Wells at 1 p.m. That program will include a presentation by an Ida B. Wells reenactor, followed by a discussion with moderator Alelia Bundles and special guest Ida B. Wells' great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster. At 5 p.m. tomorrow, there will also be a discussion with 3 secretaries of state on the very important role they play in the election process, as well as the continued struggle for women's rights. This is certainly a timely program, and we hope you can join us. You can get more information about those programs online at archivesfoundation.org. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to our partner, the National Archives Foundation, and our wonderful sponsors who you see here on the screen, whose generous support helps make these Rightfully Hers related programs possible. We are grateful for their partnership with the National Archives and the National Archives Foundation. So this concludes our program. Thank you so much for joining us today.